So, welcome to Going South. I'm excited about my conversationalist today. His name is Tim Snyder. We're old college roommates. He's one of the most interesting people I've ever met, and one of the most ethical and generous and kind. And we've stayed in touch over the years, here and there. So, one of the things when we were in college, we were both going to be ministers, and we were roommates, and he's had quite a transition from that. We were both majoring in sociology. Tim is a retired veteran from the Army. What was your rank?
I was a first sergeant. In the Army, master sergeant, first sergeant, E8.
Got you.
Yeah.
30 years?
28 years.
28 years. So almost
28 years and 11 days.
Gotcha. You retired in 2018, is that what you said?
Yep.
Gotcha. So he's a veteran. And all the while, I would notice Tim's Facebook post when he was active duty. And I guess, would you describe yourself as a liberal?
Maybe a liberal in a classic sense. I always liked the free expression of ideas, but whatever was true, I accepted that, because truth is not liberal or conservative. That's what I believe. So yeah,
it's not bipartisan.
Yeah. It's not
so
bipartisan.
Anyway, I asked him, and he's doing this kind of on the fly, so I really appreciate it. If we could chat this afternoon, particularly about his transition from being a Methodist minister to, do you identify as atheist or agnostic or like?
No. I believe there is no divine being.
Gotcha. So I'm really interested in hearing the story of that transition, because we've never really had a chance to talk about it. Tim, instead of going into, and were you accepted at Harvard out of high school too, if I remember correctly?
It was Yale and Emory.
Gotcha. And
I had no money. I had no money to go to those. There was no funding for that.
And you came to Valdosta State. It was a college then.
Yeah.
So
because of a cute girl. I came down there for a cute girl.
That's always the story.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So he ended up attending a small state college where I lived, and that's how he remembers this all better than I do. We met in a trigonometry class, but ended up taking a ton of philosophy courses. Having the greatest conversations. It was one of those wee hours in the morning. We would stay up and talk about philosophy and social theory and so on. And it was just, I look back on that time with a lot of fond memories, and was glad.
We were roommates. I was always jealous that your mom did your laundry, and I was like, I had to go to the laundromat. You got to go to your mom's house. Your mom was a nurse, and she did your laundry for you. And I was like, man.
Yeah. My mom was great. But anyway, do you want to just kind of start, I don't know where, but maybe kind of, I guess first, like, how did you get turned on to the idea of being in the ministry, particularly as a kind of Christian? I wouldn't say you were evangelical.
No.
United Methodist. Right.
United Methodists are more of they're evangelical technically, but if you look at their doctrine, they're very liberal in the way they look at society. Most people don't realize they are pro-choice. They are opposed to the death penalty. They are.
Would you say that about Southern United Methodists?
I would say that no. The United Methodist official doctrine of the United Methodist Church supports these things.
Gotcha.
They're opposed to the lottery, which we know there's a tax on people who are bad in math. So it's like that's what. But they are very, and that appealed to me even in high school. That appealed to me. And I always liked helping people. I always liked to look on people's faces when you help them. And so I had a charismatic leader in youth group, and it led me into seeking out more what the United Methodist Church stood for. So you would probably say I was more of a follower of the United Methodist philosophy doctrine than I was of the actual divinity of the religion.
I got you. Was your family religious?
No, they weren't. But this goes back to this being a part of a social group. You go to church for centuries, for decades, to be a part of a community. My dad was sort of a business leader in the community, and you go to church. It sort of grounds you. It sort of settles you into, a sense of normalcy. Yeah. And we accept that. It's actually, remember when we grew up, you're only a couple of years older than me, but it was socially unacceptable to be a non-believer in the South, especially in the South. If you're a non-believer, you're an outcast. Yeah. So you fit in. you wore your nice clothes, and that was where you went. And we didn't question it. It was not even, there was nothing nefarious. We didn't feel anything negative about it. You
Right.
felt good. So, I mean, we weren't smacked by nuns because we were Protestants.
Right.
But
We
yeah,
did you notice that there weren't like, I mean, it was pretty racially segregated, right?
they say the most segregated hour in America is
Yeah.
church.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and
I
the
think
gender thing was certainly there too, especially in the Baptist tradition that I came out of.
Right. There was no female ministers. No. And in the Methodist Church, again, 50% of the ministers, many areas are women.
Yeah.
So they've progressed. Excuse me. But it was always a sense of that's where you belonged. People went to church because that's what we always did.
Gotcha.
And conformity gives you a sense of safety. And when I say religion was originally founded upon the concept of social control, and I don't mean that in a negative way, because social order is important in what we do. And the only organization or institution that had that monopoly was religion, because there were no great business leaders in 1 BC, whatever. You had to. The only people who learned to read and write and were educated,
right,
were people of the religious order. So they had a strong advantage, and that resounds to centuries and centuries of conformity. And again, I don't mean that in a negative way.
Yeah.
But we don't follow the medical treatments that we followed 1,000 years ago. Right. We've evolved past that. But religion has a sticking point with us because it deals with eternity, and that's something that we don't understand.
Death,
we can't understand. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
That's a big one.
So,
right.
And I don't want to ramble and dominate your
No, that's okay. So when you came to Valdosta State, was the plan, because I kind of had a conversion experience from kind of out of depression and self-destruction. So here's religion. It provides you all the answers. You have a community, you belong. And if you're really hardcore in the Baptist faith, at least for me, you become kind of get a lot of attention, particularly if you want to go overseas. Particularly if you think you're going to go into the vocation, right? So there's all this kind of reinforcement that I really kind of needed at the time, I think. But did you know that when you came to college that was the path you were going to be a minister, or what was?
So I had a meeting with a pastor when I was thinking about doing that, when I was considering going into the ministry, and I'm not going to mention his name because he's still a minister in the South Georgia Conference. One of the most, I don't know, blunt men I ever met, but one of the kindest men I ever met. And he said, you don't have to believe in God to be a minister. Being a minister is about helping people.
Are we talking about the same person?
We may be.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've got a story about him too. Yeah. So
he was a Methodist minister. He probably has one of the biggest churches down there now. I can look him up.
So he didn't
believe, he was an atheist Methodist minister.
Yeah. Okay.
And I was shocked that he confided with me. I was 20 years old. He confided in me that, and I realized it was about helping people. There was a pragmatism behind Christianity, the at least where he fit in.
Yeah.
And it was like, wow, that was the epiphany that I had was, so you can help people. It's like a show. You're a showman. And he was a great speaker. He was a great public speaker. He could sell they say he could sell snow to an Eskimo, but I think that's an offensive term, Eskimo. But anyway,
well, are we talking about the same person? Because when I came back from the Philippines and had my excuse me, I'm getting over bronchitis, but I had my kind of crisis of faith. I went to a particular Methodist minister that we knew. He didn't have a church though, and I don't want to name him either because I'm sure he's still here. But he didn't say, he wasn't an atheist. He didn't necessarily believe in the deity of Jesus.
Are we talking about Steve?
No, this is somebody else.
Okay.
I forgot about Steve, not
Steve.
No, this is somebody you know well. But it was like a light bulb came on for me. And I also appreciated the fact that he was telling me something that was really dangerous in a way.
Yeah.
Kind of that confiding that he trusted me enough. And then, but that opened up the possibility of a whole different interpretation. Right.
So I would say my experience through my young being a teen through my 20s, I never met I've maybe met one United Methodist minister that I thought was bad. Everyone that I have ever met that was a United Methodist minister, and this is not, I'm not endorsing them, but they've been intelligent, kind, compassionate human beings. There's a few corrupt, but most of them were like, these are genuine people. These people want to actually help other human beings.
Yeah. So you did that conversation then say, okay, I'll do this. Like, is that what happened?
No. Well, yeah, that actually spurred me on. But then this is crazy because it was about us, and I needed a third class for we did quarters. We didn't do semesters. It was weird. We did quarters, which was crazy.
They still do in the Pacific Northwest.
Wow. Yeah. So I needed an astronomy class, and I needed a class, and the only thing was open was astronomy. I was like, okay, I'll take it. And there was a professor there, and his name was Dr. Marks, with a K, not with an X. Is he still there?
If not, he just. He
looked like Al Pacino. Him and his wife were both astronomy professors. They were brilliant. One of the most brilliant men I've ever met in my life. And he started talking about the planet Neptune. And then it started me thinking, what's the purpose of this? Why would we need a Neptune? What would be the purpose if there was some? And then I realized at that moment in class, it was a night class, and I realized there's no God. This is all.
You never told me this. This is what's kind of wild, that I never knew this about you, even living with you.
Yeah, because it was so.
Were you afraid to tell me?
No.
Yeah, because I was kind of a Bible thumper, man. in the metaphysical.
Well, you're smarter than I am, so I was like, I'm not going to debate you.
Whatever.
So.
Whatever.
So anyway, I was like, yeah, and plus I respected you because you're a few years older, and I was like, yeah, I always looked up to you as like my older brother, that I never had. So I was like, I'm not sure, but I knew at that moment that there was no God, that this was all just a Wizard of Oz, man behind the curtain, thing. It was like, wow. But it's like when you find out there's no Santa Claus, it was kind of sort of the same thing. And I wasn't disappointed. I was like actually more relieved. I was like, wow, okay, good. All right, I got this figured out. But you can still, but then he came back to my minister friend and said, you can still help people. You can still, you like the dramatic, you like, there's a he said, what did he say?
Almost like liturgy or.
Yeah, he was a Star Wars guy too, which is funny. And he's like, there's a lot of truth in myth. There's more truth in myth than there is sometimes in history. And I was like, wow, that resonated with me.
Kind of Joseph Campbell-y,
Yes. Kind of and then there's a sort of a being on stage kind of thing. Being the minister is sort of like, it's sort of a vanity, like a great speaker. And we look at Martin Luther King Jr. and I can watch a speech of him forever because the charisma is there. And it's like, wow, And I said, I aspired, hey, maybe that's something I could do. But then I couldn't continue with that. I said, I cannot be unfaithful to what I really believe. I could not continue that ruse.
My problem was in my tradition, you had to turn off your brain. You couldn't ask,
Yeah, you're right.
Which was not scriptural either, right? Because I would quote to this pastor, well, aren't you supposed to love God with all your mind? So that was my big dilemma, was that when it was clear to me that when I would ask questions of the leadership in my faith tradition, they couldn't answer the questions, and they were afraid of them in some ways, or it was wrong to ask them, and you could really, really tell, So you come to college, you have that experience. Is this before you take the two churches part-time?
Yes, this is before I take the two churches. They needed help. The bishop said, we really need this help. And I told him, I'm not planning to go into the seminary. I'm planning on joining the military.
Well, see, I didn't know that either.
Well, we were not living that. We just, yeah. I think it was when I left.
Were you married at the time?
Not almost. I was engaged.
Right.
So So that was the point where I was like, I'm not going to seminary. I mean, you know what? If I had to go back and do it again, I probably would have gone to seminary because that was a great Emory University, regardless of what they're teaching. I mean, that is a center of great learning.
Yeah. I didn't get in. That's why I didn't go.
Oh, it probably would have solidified actually my atheism even stronger getting to there. And I probably would have gone to law school, and then I would have killed myself if I'd done that. But I don't think I was smart enough to go to law school at the time. I definitely didn't have the money, so I thought, the military's got what I want.
Well, can we talk about that? Because I would have, as a kid of a military family, as somebody that had 2 physicals because I wanted to be an airborne ranger, I would have never guessed that you had any interest in going down that road.
So remember I worked at Greyhound. It was great job working at Greyhound. Gundi Heller, she was still alive when I came back and saw you. She was tougher than any drill sergeant I ever had. So the recruiter would come in every day with the recruits. They would come in, they'd take their bus down to Jacksonville, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, he said he was always trying to recruit me. And I said, well, if you can get me to Hawaii, pay off my student loans, give me a bonus, and let me learn a language, I'll join. He's like, we can't do that. There's no way. Forget about it. My senior year, near the end.
You were in college?
I was still in college.
Yeah.
He knew I was a student because everybody that worked there, she only hired college students. So, so it was I think it was March. I was getting close to graduation, and he's like, I can get you everything you just asked for.
Wow. And
I said, well, I did tell you this. I'm a man of my word, so I'm going to join. And he was shocked.
And these are the Marines, so this is
Army. It was all about Army. It was all about the Army. So he said, this is what I can give you. And he gave me a contract, never lied to me, told me this is what you're going to get.
Wow.
And everything he said was true.
Wow.
So I joined.
You learned Arabic? Is that right?
Korean.
Yes.
Hangumal Chamoteo.
Okay. Is that what you wanted to learn?
Actually, I wanted to learn Russian. But so Korean was my second choice, and they gave me Korean.
Gotcha. For some reason, I thought you learned Arabic.
No, but I do speak a little. I can still speak Russian. I can speak Russian because my ex-wife is Russian.
Okay.
But Korean is my primary language. And a little French. You get that with traveling. So, but I got to live in Korea, live in Hawaii. They paid off my student loans, which at the time there was nothing compared to what people know. I think I had $8,000 in student loans, and I thought that was crippling. So I can't even imagine what people go through today. But yeah, so I said I'm gonna do 4 years, get enough money, save some money, get my PhD in sociology, and go back and do something.
I got to tell and help me with this story if I get it wrong, but you were such a humanitarian. You remember the Jamaican dude you brought?
Oh my, no, he said he was from Panama.
So he stayed with us for the longest time, and I got pissed. He was like faking the accent or something. He was grifting us. Yeah.
Yeah, he was definitely. He was. I
think I ended up having to kick him out.
I bought him a bus ticket and got him on his way.
Yeah.
But
he stayed with us, right, for a while.
Maybe like a week.
Yeah.
But you figured him out before I did. we took him to the place about his traveler's checks. Yeah. And you slapped the glasses off his face.
Did I really?
Yes. And you're like, dude, you were mad. You weren't mad at him. You were mad because he was taking advantage of my kindness.
Well, see, that's the thing. That's why I was a bit of an assorl back in the. I was incredibly angry back in those days.
But then I realized that's when I first realized that this guy was a fake. And I went to visit him in prison.
Really?
And I before he left, and I said, I know what you are. And then he started speaking in his normal accent. He was from Cincinnati. So he stopped his accent, and I said.
So he came clean, though.
He did come clean at the end.
Oh, that's cool.
And I bought him a bus ticket to Cincinnati, and that was it. I've never heard from him.
So he got locked up. Was that?
He got locked up.
Okay.
I don't know what he did. I have no idea what he did. So here's the thing: he borrowed my truck, and he brought it back.
Wow.
And he brought it back to me, and so at least he had some sort of.
Yeah.
But the entire front seat was covered in baby powder. So I realized he met a girl and he had sex with her in my truck. So that's when I knew this dude. So then he got locked up. And I was like, well, at least he did something to clean it up. Come on. So, but I've been cynical against people. But you were the first guy that you were like, this guy. Because when we were playing those little Nerf hoops in our apartment.
Yeah.
And you're like, dude, this guy's
See, I grew up with danger, so you had to have a radar to smell the bullshit,
I lived a sheltered life growing up. I'm not gonna lie, I was sheltered.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. So anyway. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
No. So back to where I realized, hey, so when I said I'm going to go to the Army and figure out what I'm going to do, go to graduate school, get my PhD in sociology. And then
so you're going to enlist for 4 years
I did my 4 years. I was going to do my 4 years. And so I realized when I got to the Army, this is a gigantic sociological experiment. I'm in a lab looking at people and observing people from different walks of life. And I was like, I don't need to go to graduate school. I can just watch the people and learn from the people I work with.
And why didn't you go to officer candidate school? Because you had a degree.
No. So exactly. That's a very good question. So I had 3 friends. We joined together. We all had college degrees. And they were about a year older, and they went to officer candidate school first. They did it. They made it through. And I was like, I'm going to wait and see. All 3 of them hated being officers. They hated it.
Really?
They hated what they had to go through. I mean, I have great respect for military officers. There's a lot that they have to deal with
in terms of bureaucracy
there's a zero tolerance for error. And I'm a guy that makes lots of mistakes. So, and I like being a part of it. I like being I'm a working class guy. I want to be the guy who, pounds the metal out or puts the sprocket on or whatever. I don't want to be the guy telling, hey, you need to get 75 widgets done this hour. I don't want to be that guy. I never wanted to be that guy. So I was like, and one of my best friends said at the Army said, don't do it. Don't do it. And I didn't. I had my paperwork all filled out, ready to go, and it said it'll get accepted, but I just stopped. I didn't do it. It was the right decision to make.
Wow.
So I stayed enlisted, and I moved up the ranks fairly quickly, and
Well, one of the things I noticed over the years on Facebook, you didn't hide your kind of left political leanings,
right,
or your atheism. Like at times you would kind of even mock believers.
Yeah, I went away from that because my aunt Betsy, who lives in this town here in Clearfield, where they've been their entire lives, and they've been a part of the Methodist Church forever, and she's the sweetest woman that I, bar none, the nicest woman so I've toned down that because it actually she called me one day about 4 years ago and said, this really hurts me. So I stopped.
That's good.
Because I didn't want her to feel pain.
Yeah.
And so I was like, yeah, you know what? I can talk about things without involving the religious aspect of it.
Yeah. Well, that leads me to a question about the Methodist Church then. So do you feel like most congregates are believers kind of in a metaphysical deity?
Yes. And it goes back to what is our greatest fear as human beings, that one day we will no longer exist. If you tell me there's a way, there's a formula, there's a plan where you can live forever after you die, see the ones you love, see the people that meant everything to you. If you could sell me the hope of that, that's the best. That's the best product you can sell me. If I'm vulnerable, if I feel like, imagine a person who's lost their child.
Yeah, no doubt.
And or they love their grandmother, like, man, the hope that I can see this person in one day.
Right.
Just for believing something.
Right.
That might be a bet worth, you don't lose anything.
Right. Kind of Occam's razor. Was it Occam's?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like, what do you, and it's an easy lose. It's an easy buy. It's an easy sell for that. But I think it does a disservice to us. I think it gives us a false sense. Like Brothers Karamazov. We have, the greatest novel I've read in the last 20 years is God Is Not Great: How Religion Poisoned Everything by Christopher Hitchens. Now he was a He was very homophobic, but
A
his
little
intellect,
misogynistic too.
yeah, his intellect was off the chart though. His intellect was off the chart. He didn't see he saw the pragmatism, but he also saw the destruction that religion can do to us.
Are you a fan of Sam Harris?
Yes. Oh, yes. But yes. And yeah.
Yeah. Well, because this is I'm just hearing voices in my head. Like, what do you say to the folks that are going to say, well, look, have you ever met religious atheists? Like there's a certainty and dogma in being being an atheist. Do you know what I mean? Like, so yes. I can hear folks saying, well, how can you be certain about this? You haven't experienced death, blah, 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 blah. And what's your response to that?
Well, I would say, well, how can you prove I didn't kill Kennedy? You can't.
You weren't old enough.
Right. You don't have to prove that something doesn't exist.
Right.
And you can't say, well, what about all the? Well, yeah, you can say, what about all the beauty and that's subjective. Yeah. What is not subjective is that 1,000 children in Bangladesh die of dysentery every day. Right. So that's not subjective. So then I say, well, if there is so this is the thing I like about Christopher Hitchens. His compassionate part was, like people say, oh, well, I wish I could believe in God. I want to believe in that God. No, you don't. That's a God you don't want to believe in.
In terms of kind of the traditional authoritarian.
He's failed us. He sat out the Holocaust. I mean, you could say good things happen.
The retort to that, though, is we just can't understand. It has a bigger meaning, blah, 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 which is great unless you were in Auschwitz.
That's like a second grade. I never want to insult believers. Yeah. But I say that if you break it down, and that comes back to what my daughter said one day, because I never talked about religion. I never talked about atheism when my daughter she was about 8 or 9, 10, maybe 11.
Did she know that you were a minister at one point in time?
Yes, she knew that. And her friends went to church, and she asked me one day, I think we were driving to go to the movies or something, and she asked me about religion, and she asked me about Christianity, and I said, well, hey, there's some people who believe this, that Jesus, there was a historical figure named Jesus, and these are the things he believed, and then some people believe this, and some people believe it's made up. And she paused for like maybe 10 seconds, and then she looked at me and she says, I think it's all made up. And she was 11, and I never ever ever indoctrinated her to anything, and I realized that at that point, that was like, she's got it.
She also didn't have all the social pressure of growing up somewhere where she's right.
If you don't if you don't go to Sunday school.
You said this when we first started talking, like if you aren't a believer here, even now, I think and most atheists I know here are pretty closeted. They
even now?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Well, we just go out and live our lives.
Yeah.
We don't have
nobody asks, right? The assumption is that you must be a believer of some sort.
We get 3 extra hours of sleep on Sunday, so come on. Or if you're
depends on your denomination.
If you're an Adventist, yes. If you're
Yeah.
But the thing that I looked at, I read the novel, the book, The Looming Tower, and it talks about Bin Laden. And what makes me have great respect for Islam, as far as it's as much respect for Christianity, is Bin Laden did not want to take the towers down. His initial thing was, I can't attack people who are innocent. And the Imam, what's it called? His leader, his spiritual leader, said to him, well, if we kill them and they have a pure heart, they will be in paradise.
Not a problem.
Yeah. So they're okay if a person of a pure heart. And then then it's like, wow, that's what. So and now I am engaged. I have a woman. I have and she's in Morocco, and we've known each other for the last 6 years. And
wow.
So, and she's a devout Muslim.
Wow.
And so,
as active duty, because you've been in Afghanistan, where else?
So right.
Like, I mean, because was there room to be that considerate and empathetic, or was there pressure to be pretty anti-Muslim?
No. In fact, most of our interpreters were all Muslims. They were followers. I had a guy from Afghanistan who then they taught him English in Utah, and he converted to Mormonism. So he was an Afghani Mormon, which I don't even know. He's still one of the nicest guys I know. Kept his name from Afghanistan. One of the best guys I've ever met in my life. But he's a devout Mormon now. We wouldn't even go down that route.
Yeah.
So I realized, hey, you know what? There are what do we call it? Secular Christians. And I think there's a social, like you said, there's a social pressure to be a believer.
Especially in this part of the country, I would say.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's secular Jews, there's,
Right.
down the list too, right? Where it's kind of more of a cultural thing.
But you still got to go to church.
Yeah.
You still gotta, you still gotta love Jesus,
Well, this, someone has asked me, cause I'm still kind of a utopian idealist, pretty left. And if you were, I mean, cause I've read Mao, I've read Marx,
right.
I've read all the stuff here that's supposed to be dangerous. Because I always thought, well, if we're free, I'm supposed to be able to check this stuff out for myself, but one of the more radical books I ever read was the Gospel of Mark, and I say that all the time. Like, I mean, the radical principles. I also remember, I don't know if you were in there when Jim Hill, one of the philosophy professors, said nobody should read the Bible until they're like 25. It's the most dangerous book on the planet.
No.
Yeah.
And one of the other ones that turned me on to this sort of liberal Christianity was a guy named Tony Campolo. I don't know if you ever heard about him. He's like the liberal. Yeah. He one day he was at a big conference, just a stadium size, and he said, tonight 10,000 people will die of hunger in our country, and you people don't give a shit about it. He said this, and he said, you're more upset that I said the word shit than you are upset that 10,000 people died tonight because of hunger.
Yeah.
And that was like mind blowing to me. So.
Yeah, there's a way I feel like the story was hijacked, and I've been disappointed at liberal Christians for not taking it back from evangelicals who kind of hijacked it in a way.
The Catholic Church is actually the Pope is actually trying.
He is, isn't he?
To take it. He's trying to go that way, and then people are saying, "What? This guy?" And the Catholics are saying, "This guy. What is this guy?" It's like, that's your guy, man. That's your whole doctrine. You got to believe in this guy.
Yeah.
They've been trying to move that way. I think Pope John Paul II, he tried to move that way, but he couldn't.
Yeah. Well, it seems to me to be an interesting story about what happens when you challenge power and challenge social norms, and
right.
What you can probably expect if you push real hard.
But I will tell you, if we look back at U.S. presidents, and they're significant in the shape of the world, I think we go back. I think the last president that was truly a Christian may have been Jimmy Carter.
I would say Carter too.
I would say Reagan was not. I mean, he was socially. Clinton, Bush, Clinton, they were smart men. These were not stupid men. Trump was just, he is a believer, but the God is him. Yeah. The other ones, I don't think Obama, Clinton, Bush, I think they didn't, they believed in the idea of America and freedom, but I don't think they really believe that there's a divine. I think deep down inside they know there's not a God. I think that's true.
I took my mom to see Carter in 2008 because you can go see him teach Sunday school. I think he's
down in Plains, really.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we're sitting there. It's the most surreal thing, right? Secret Service checks you out before you come in, and we were in the front pew. And Rosalind and James Horton, who started Habitat for Humanity, as well as I think the Highlander School during the Civil Rights Movement, where black and white folks, not Coretta Scott King, but Rosa Parks and King, all kind of strategized around the movement. And I'm just thinking, man, that's James Horton, man, that's Rosalind Carter. And Carter, this is 2008, before Barack Obama's elected president. And he lays out an analysis of how the American national election doesn't meet the Carter criteria for democratic elections.
Yes.
And
I read about it, yes.
wow, like this is pretty cool. You know?
How does North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming get 2 senators each, and Pennsylvania, California only get 2? I mean, it's like, it is a,
Well, just the logistics of everybody having their own ballot, their own process too, you know, which is all a states' rights kind of thing. But in terms of what the Carter Center does in monitoring elections across the country, is like the U.S. doesn't pass our criteria.
no, I know. Yeah. I mean, I was pleasantly surprised that Georgia actually rose to the occasion.
We'll see what happens today. Early voting started.
For the Senate, yeah.
Yeah.
When that actually would cause me to move back I would actually move back to Valdosta. One, so we could have sushi outside of Belk's, but but I've been contemplating a move back to the Valdosta area, because one thing Valdosta needs is more liberals. More white liberals.
Yeah. That's a good way of putting it. So how did you help me understand how you squared your ethics with going into the military, right? Particularly if you're going to have to potentially take the life of another person in combat. Like,
we look at this, and that's a good question. So I had soldiers, and they were in military intelligence, you're going to get a little, they're going to weed out, and you're going to get a little more people that are going to ask me why are we doing this? What's our point?
Well, and could you say what your MOS was?
I was a SIGINT intelligence analyst. So I analyzed raw SIGINT data.
Gotcha.
So we would intercept from cell phones, radios, internet, whatever our adversary was discussing, or anybody that was not an ally. Any information that we were able to intercept, I would take it, look at the raw data, and see what was this important, was this not. So that's what I did.
Particularly around North Korea, or can you say?
Well, it's not actually the big signs outside these places, military intelligence battalion, and you're like, oh, how come there's a lot of Korean people that work here? Yeah, well, yeah. So my focus initially was China, and understanding what the Chinese, and there was like, well, they're not a threat. They're not a global threat. They don't want to expand. They're not trying to kill people. Then they moved me to Korea, and Korea does have a threat. There's a huge threat, but they only want to they just want to continue living the way they live. That's what the leaders want. So, but that's why I analyzed raw data and to discern whether this was valuable information or was it, no big deal. So what was the original question?
Well, but no, you're one of the most moral, ethical, like I said, humanitarians.
So let's look,
wanting to help people as an atheist minister.
Let's look at Afghanistan. Nobody in the world is going to help these people.
No, I got you. But I guess I'm asking, what was your thinking that, okay, the way I can help people is to go into the Army?
Well, so one of it was like
more utilitarian because you got this debt, you want to go to Hawaii.
Yeah, this guy, I made a promise to my recruiter and he gave me what I wanted. And then I found out, wow, you know what? Most people don't, I never realized there's a bastion of liberalism in the Army.
Wow. Because
people are treated equal for the most part. I mean, a woman and a man, it doesn't matter. You're paid the same based on your performance. You get promoted. Everyone at this rank gets paid the same, but you also have the same obligation. So people are treated the same. This is wow. So, but it's forced. But then as you move up in the ranks, you realize my job is to take care of my 10 guys, or this is my responsibility. I'm responsible as I become a squad leader. I'm responsible for 10 people. As I become a platoon sergeant, I got 75 people. So it went back to the ministerial thing. I'm responsible for these guys. I'm their counselor. I'm their mentor. They're younger. They have young families. How do I do this? How do I make a budget? I felt this was like, hey, most of my job is helping these people. These are the people performing the job. As I become a first sergeant, now I have 150 people. And I have to mentor platoon sergeants and help them help their people. So it was all about, for me, it was all about just being sort of like being a minister. Being a first sergeant was like being a minister. You were responsible for the care and feeding and the well-being of these people whose lives and their family they put in trust in you. So it fit naturally. Being a soldier was like being a minister.
What about the agenda of the nation though, and there's a part, I mean, the liberal and left critique that you
Right.
basically you have to abjugate your own, not moral compass, but you've got to follow orders, right? And not only that, what are you being used to do? Is it expansionist in the sense of an American empire? Is it legitimate to protect the American people, right? Don't you kind of have to go ahead.
So I joined when I was in basic training. That's when Iraq invaded Kuwait, and we have
So this
kind
is
of
Gulf War One. Right?
That was the first one.
Yeah.
So here's another nation invading another nation, and our intent was just to get them out. But I think there was a corporate side of America, very high and powerful, that said, you know what, this is oil. These are oil reserves. This is our trillions of dollars that we cannot let these people control. So we need to be in charge of this. And I think even with George Bush, the second, I think his intent was we cannot let. And then the biggest mistake they made was they disenfranchised the entire Iraqi military. We didn't treat them just the same with Japan. We didn't think that they were the same value as American lives or Western lives were. It goes back to that's why we didn't intervene in Vietnam. We intervened on the wrong side. The Vietnamese, they just wanted to have their own country without the French intervention. So I don't know. I mean, we permitted Saddam to build his empire. We can go down this rabbit hole forever.
I don't.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily want to. I'm more interested in kind of your internal process, and because again, like you're again one of the nicest, kindest guys.
That does sort of hit me.
That's not to stereotype people in the. I mean, again,
right.
My dad was a lifer. All my uncles were, and my motivation for wanting to be a green, airborne ranger was I wanted to be a badass killer. Like
you would have been easy. You would have made it easy. You would have been like through that. You'd have had no problem.
Well, I wanted a target for my rage. It wasn't. I wanted to defend I wanted everybody to know I was a badass.
So for me, it was I want to help liberate people. I looked at it from I want to liberate oppressed people. I want to be a part of that process of liberating people who cannot fight for themselves. So that's
what we have in common, because for 30 years, kind of the racial justice stuff and gender stuff I've done it's domestic, though. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's realizing that, man, well, it's kind of the missionary thing again. When I was in the Philippines, I looked around about the second month and I realized, what the hell are we doing here? Like,
so you were Methodist or Baptist at this time?
So I was a Baptist, right? And the country's 82% Catholic.
Yeah.
And like
they got down in Mindanao, there's some Muslims down there.
Yeah, well, the New People's Army was real active where I was, so it was dicey. Like,
did you go down to like General Santos City?
No, I was out in the bush. I was in a place called Tabaco Albay, north of Legazpi City.
Okay, I was
by an active volcano.
Oh my God! So I was in Batangas for a while. And we were training their military guys to this basic how to intercept and how to process data. But you were down there. It's like,
the other part of it, I think it was also where I started going even further left, because I never knew how many times the Philippines had been colonized and it was an American territory at one point in time. Hell, I didn't know till the other day that they were bombed the same day Pearl Harbor was.
Yeah.
I didn't know. Well, and I'd seen Ferdinand Marcos and Imelda Marcos be exiled to Hawaii, and the U.S. press was, the Corazon Aquino had ousted these, democratically elected folks, blah, blah, blah. But when I was living with Filipinos, they were like, oh no, those people, they were terrible leaders, right?
Who, Marcos's or Aquino?
the Marcoses.
Yeah, they were
right. And
that's like Romania, Ceausescu. Yes,
right. So the first time I thought about, well, maybe what I'm getting back home is kind of propaganda, right? Because what Filipinos are telling me is something very different than I saw on NBC News.
Right.
So I had no kind of political analysis of where I was. I was just there to save souls, brother.
You were saving Catholic souls. That's always got. That was it.
Well, that was the thing. I realized, holy cow, this is wrong. We're not spreading God's love. We're here trying to convert people to our viewpoint. And then I came back. I guess we didn't take existentialism together.
No,
because I fell in love with existentialism.
So after you were sort of pseudo Methodist because you got the keyboard gig at the Cornerstone Church, and which was yeah. So anyway, but so sorry for bringing that up. Then you went you became a Baptist.
Well, no,
you were always a Baptist.
I was always a Baptist, and I came back. Frierson was still there. He turned me on to like all the Christian existentialists. I read Kierkegaard. And I fell in love with it, especially Attack on Christendom, where he's critiquing the church. Like it's the Brothers Karamazov, where Jesus comes back, and what do the priests do? They basically say, "We're going to kill your ass again because you're messing shit up."
You're not.
We don't need you. We don't need you. Right? Don't mess up our gig here, right? So I got exposed to all of that, in addition to Paul Tillich, as well as Sartre and Camus.
Yeah,
that whole body of stuff about meaninglessness, and and I was grappling with it, and it was probably one of the most painful things to let this thing that explained everything go. It was this neat. It was really a crisis of faith that was tough to go through. And I went to my pastor, who clearly had never read or thought, and you're supposed to read this stuff, right? Couldn't answer any questions. Also my church, after living with Filipinos in a shanty on the second floor above a brothel.
no hot water to speak of.
No hot water, no refrigeration, a hole to poop in and take a shower in. And I loved it, man. I had more culture shock coming back home. And I just had a great experience, and I didn't want to come back to the States, in all honesty. And then when I did, coming back to padded pews and people complaining about air conditioner not being, like this, what are we doing?
So what year are we talking about here?
86.
Okay.
Yeah. And I tried to talk to the religious leaders, and it was clear they didn't know what they're talking about, and I was supposed to just swallow it and accept it on faith kind of.
So did they give you the quote, what Proverbs a fool has said in his heart, there is no God? And it's like that's their default.
Well, I wasn't even claiming to be agnostic or atheist at the time. I was just looking for some questions. And then I went to a person that you had worked with. I called him, and I was just, a couple of things happened. I remember riding the scooter that I bought from you down Ashley Street one day and realizing, this idea of God in my head is very kind of Freudian. It's, he is my dad was so violent and, angry and wrathful, and watching your every move. I was like, holy cow, that's this. Like this, and this is messed up. And then I called this person, and I said, man, can I come talk to you? And I knew him through you, so he remembered me. He used to go to a lot of basketball games, let me put it that way.
Wait, do I know this guy?
Yeah, you know him.
Okay.
Sweet guy, great man, just a good man. And he met with me, and that's when he confided, look, all the supernatural stuff, I don't care about that. Mm-hmm. And I also read Rudolf Bultmann, who had demythologized the New Testament.
Yeah.
And really talked about the humanity of the Christ as an idea, whether it's mythical or real. And that spoke to me.
So if we go back,
it's still that's where my politics come from.
There's a group I belong to. It's called Atheists for Jesus. And it was like, yeah, yeah, they killed him because he was a radical liberal.
Yeah,
I mean, we could
yeah,
say liberal because he wanted to replace competition and struggle with cooperation and
yeah. It was a political
redemption.
assassination,
Yeah,
right?
redemption was not a part of that equation back then.
Yeah, yeah. You should read Zealot.
Okay.
This I'll get you the author's name, but and then you start thinking about Roman occupation, the political context, right? The taboos,
Constantinople, yes.
yeah, and the fact that the execution technique of crucifixion, that he's killed for sedition, right? And so putting a whole political lens on it and really humanizing it, as well as just the fact that he grappled with it, with the whole story of the Garden of Gethsemane, of like, man, do I have to do this?
Yes.
Like, I really don't want to do this, but
So one of the
yeah,
most spiritual films I've ever seen was The Last Temptations of
yeah,
Christ.
yeah.
And remember, it came out, I think we were in college when it came out.
Yeah, we were.
And it was, when I eventually saw it, I was like, this is the most moving spiritual
The book is
film
so
I've ever
better.
seen. Yes.
Yeah,
Oh yeah. And he the guy struggled with the humanity and the divinity of Christ. And I don't think Christ ever thought he was divine.
Yeah, yeah. When I, given the political works that I do, for me, I think the spiritual is political, and I don't mean metaphysical.
Yes.
Yes. Right? I think if you are political and you're working to make the world a kinder place and you're challenging power, you confront mortality. Yes. I mean, I feel it here, that even doing this thing and putting it out in the world. I interviewed a guy a couple of days ago. We were just talking about the risk of saying some of the things we're saying publicly, especially in today's climate, right? So,
right.
That story still resonates with me deeply, and I don't care about the metaphysics and going back to heaven. I don't want to live forever. I don't want, I'd love to see my dad again and some other people, but I don't know if I want to hang out forever. And I sure as hell don't want to hang out with a bunch of evangelicals. If I told somebody one time,
right.
Who told me if I was going to hell, and I was like, so you're going to heaven? And he goes, yeah. I was like, well, if you're going to be there and I've got to spend eternity with you, that would be hell, so,
But I think what's the selling point is, wow, I can see my mother again.
Yeah.
And that is like, we want that hope, even if it's false hope, we want it. It's like going to a magic show when you're young, even when you're old, you see he cuts the woman in half, or that's fantastic. And you're going to go back and see that again, or a card trick. Yeah. But then when you sit down in your home and you just realize, you know what, this was not real. I'm fascinated by it, but it's not real. So but a percentage will believe it.
Where do you, like, because the other thing people will argue is you need religion to have ethics and so forth. I think Sam Harris and other folks take all that apart. But like, right. So what do you attribute your kind of moral core to? Because the most moral people, my friend who's the anarchist yesterday, is one of the nicest human beings I've ever met. One of the most ethical, generous, right? So what do you think that core is about for you, since it's not religiously based?
So this is all we get. We get one shot, and everybody's
not a simulation.
Yes, this is not. This is a one game and you're over. When you lose your guy, you're good done. So what we can do to improve the lives and improve our life is to realize this is it. This is we owe it to each other to, I don't know, not make someone happy. I'm not responsible for your happiness, but I am responsible to see that my daughter or our people who follow us, that their world is a little bit better. It's like you don't throw trash
right
and just leave it around. You have a sense of decency for what other people think, and it may come down to what your mother did as a nurse. I mean, a lot of times we do things just to survive. We are in survival mode, but then we're able to reflect. We're only, I think, us and elephants, maybe dolphins, are aware of their own mortality. We realize this is not going to last, and so we want to be good people. People want to be good, but I don't know. my morality is based on the fact that you want to see people smile. You don't want to see people cry. And it's that simple. What can I do to help you become a better person, to make your life better? But there's a lot is out of your control. If you were abused, beaten, look at our prisons. A child has no control of their early environment,
right,
and what shapes them. And you don't have a control of your DNA either. So is it random? Is it, but I think that as a collective group, there's where the religion thing does have a pragmatic, organized religion had a pragmatic effect on us, in that it actually helped us build that sense. These are the things that we can collectively share. These are the things you don't do. These are the things that you can do. And I think this, again, goes back to Jesus. There was a compassion there. Same with Buddha. Same with we can say Gandhi. There was a sense of compassion that would propel us into the future. Yeah. But then we realize, okay, let's take the metaphysical away, and just focus on the philosophy of it, and it works.
So would you say you're a humanist?
Oh, without a doubt, yes. And I believe that if we act in the best interest of others, it actually serves to work in our own best interests. And that's contrary that's contrary to Ayn Rand, which I mean, her writings were influential, but she was like, if you act upon your own self-interest, then it helps people. I'm the flip side. Yeah. Work for the help of others, and it makes your life better. And that's what
you're sounding like an anarchist right now.
What's that?
You're sounding like an anarchist.
Oh, but I'm not. We need somebody's got to pave the road.
But I think folks don't. That's a whole nother conversation. But yeah. So when you go in, you're going to do 4 years. When it comes time to re-up, what happened?
Okay, so here's the thing. Good sales pitch. They were like,
the bonuses are always good, right? Too.
Well, my first one, I didn't get a bonus.
Really?
The first reenlistment, I didn't get a bonus, but I got a choice of where I wanted to go, which was Fort Lewis. Well, I wanted to live in the Seattle area. So
you did 4 years in Hawaii, or?
So my enlistment was in Hawaii. So 1 year of training. It was a whole year of training and 3 years in Hawaii. And they said, okay, I'm ready. I'm gonna go back to graduate school, go back to University of Georgia or Texas A&M because of Chet. And I thought, but he said, hey, you can get Seattle, you can get Fort Lewis, Washington. I said, well, that sounds good. So I went to Fort Lewis and I loved it. And they offered me Korea. And I said, oh, I want to live in Korea for sure. So they kept so what happened to me, they kept offering me good places to work.
Yeah. So what did you re-up for the second time? How long?
It was 3 years. And then the second time I got a bonus, and it was to go to Korea. And then I got to go to Arizona after that, then back to Korea, then Hawaii again, then Texas.
How long were you in Korea?
I spent about 5 years there.
Wow.
Not in a row, like 2 and 3.
Some of my best friends from grad school are Korean folk, second generation. They're funny.
Yes.
The sense of humor and the kind of self-deprecation, not to stereotype all Korean folks, but there's a special thing about Korean humor. Like it's.
Well, I don't know if you saw the film Parasite.
I just watched it 2 nights ago.
So at the Academy Awards, the director, he's a big fan of Martin Scorsese, and Martin Scorsese said, dude, you're a better director than I ever was. Yeah. And so that says a lot, because Scorsese was good.
Well, their films are off the chain.
Yes.
Their films are great.
Yes. They're deep. They're deep.
They're deep. Yeah. They're them Scandinavian films. We'll talk film one day, but
yeah. But they go beyond. So we think 2 weeks out. They think decades. They think centuries out. And that's the one thing we don't realize as a Western civilization. We're young as a civilization.
Yeah.
So anyway, where were we?
We had 5 years in Korea.
Then I did Korea, then in Hawaii again. I couldn't turn down Hawaii again. Then I got to go to Texas to be a teacher, to train my course, and then then I got Kentucky, which I always wanted to be a light. I wanted to be a light infantry guy.
Really?
And I was in my 40s when I went to light infantry finally. And so I was like, I want to test myself. And then I went to Fort Meade. I didn't make the next rank. I was like, hey, it's fine. I'm going to retire. And then Pennsylvania was my route because my family has always been from this area of Pennsylvania.
Yeah, when I met you, your family's in Warner Robins, I think. Is that right?
They were in Warner Robins. They moved to Florida.
Right.
But both my mom and dad are from Clearfield, Pennsylvania, where I live now. The family settled there in like 1852. One of the funny things is I think the story was my dad's family was from Oil City, Pennsylvania, and they were trying to go to Philadelphia in the 40s. And as they were driving in the 50s, they were driving through. The truck broke down in Clearfield on Highway 322, and he was an electrician. My grandfather was an electrician, and I think he lived off of a gallon of whiskey a day. So he was the only electrician that couldn't go in the military in the 40s, so they kept him here, and that's where they stayed.
Wow.
And so they met in high school, eloped. I was born in D.C., but my dad was a Kmart manager, Kmart.
Yeah, Kmart.
Blue light special. So I just moved around, and that's why the military life was good for me, because my dad moved around, and so I like that moving around life. Change. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I still consider New Orleans. That's where my formative years were in the New Orleans area. But if I could say, if I can move anywhere today, I would go to Valdosta, Georgia today.
That's surprising. Yeah.
What was our address? Was it like 815 and a half Park Avenue or something like that?
You should go on Zillow. That house is for sale.
Remember that German Shepherd that used to bark in the backyard? We got the air horn. Anyway. Yeah. We paid $175 a month, and that included utilities. That was
for both of us too.
Yes. You can't. That thing probably rents for like $700 a month now.
No, I don't think so. No. I think it's on the market right now at like 38. The house. Did
anyone ever live in that house? I don't remember anyone in that house.
No. I met the granddaughter of the woman. It's a really interesting story. When I came back, I was still living there, and the granddaughter of the woman who owned the place was house sitting. And
beautiful house, by the way.
Yeah. So she invited me downstairs. We hung out some, went down to the Itchtuckney River, but there was an extensive library in that house. And in that library was Ram Dass, Be Here Now, Suzuki Roshi's, all these books that you would never find in South Georgia. And the grandmother was in declining, so she goes, take whatever books you want. So my first copy of Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind came from that house.
Unbelievable.
And I started meditating. And I so wanted to meet that woman. You know what I mean? Like, I wanted to meet this person who probably was born in the 20s, lived in South Georgia most of her life, was clearly an intellectual, reading stuff that you would, like, it was fascinating. Yeah.
I would never have guessed that. I would never.
Like, me either. Pretty sophisticated people, very interesting too. So, and the granddaughter was nice and interesting too. I knew her brother, but so I got turned on to Zen Buddhism because of that library.
What year were we talking about here? The 90s?
I graduated in 90, so probably 89.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. And I started meditating, which was
so really you actually achieved atheism before I did.
I'm still pretty agnostic because I've done enough drugs to.
Well, have you read the Drake equation?
I haven't.
You should look it up. It's something that looks at how many civilizations exist in the known universe as advanced or more advanced than our Earth. And the low estimate, the conservative estimate, is in tens of the millions. And we look at and that's the other thing that really took me to atheism, when I realized we are 25,000 light years from the center of our own galaxy.
Yeah.
Within our galaxy, there's more stars than there are grains of sand on the Earth.
Yeah.
And then there's hundreds of billions of galaxies. And that's just, so people it makes them feel small, but it actually makes me feel empowered. Like, man,
right.
I'm just this flash of life.
Yeah. Well, I'm just joking about the drugs thing.
Yeah.
In grad school, you experiment with stuff, but
you went to Texas, right? You were in Texas for grad school?
Texas the first time, and then New Mexico the second time.
I didn't. So I did apply to grad school at University of Texas. I got rejected.
At UT?
Yes.
That's surprising.
Yeah, I don't know, because I don't know. I don't know why, but I got rejected, and that ended my search for my PhD in sociology.
Yeah, back to the agnostic question though. I just don't think we can know it. If you know what I mean, like I don't know. Like I just don't know, and it's also really not super important to me.
So if we think about it, there definitely could be a higher evolved life form. There definitely is a higher evolved life form than we are in the universe.
Yeah, that
could have powers that we don't understand,
or just technology.
Exactly. Like, when the Japanese came into some parts of Indonesia with their battleships, people came and fought them on canoes with spears. It's like, that's what it was. That's what it's like. And I think that if imagine us a billion years from now, what evolution we would have.
Not to go down a weird road here, but have you seen the Tic Tac footage from the Nimitz, the UFO stuff?
No, I have not. No. But I'm a strong believer that, yes, there are advanced civilizations out there.
These are all military fighter pilot folks that get it on camera, and it's doing things that defy.
There's no doubt that there's something that has a greater technology that's figured it out already.
Yeah.
But how they would finding us in this remote universe would be just based on our radio transmissions. The first galactic radio transmissions were 1936 that we were able to send out. So if they were able to get them speed of light, you start figuring that stuff out. Man, maybe pick them up.
Wormholes, though, man. It could be. Yeah. Who knows? Who knows?
That's way beyond me. That's way beyond my understanding.
I was thinking about you the other day because Alex Trebek died.
Yeah.
You remember? You should go on Jeopardy, man. That's what I was always thinking.
If Will Ferrell hosts as Alex Trebek, I will go. I'll definitely do it.
So did you meet Jon Stewart? I saw the picture.
Yeah, I did meet him. We were in Afghanistan. We had we had lunch together, 30 minutes, and we talked. And I remember I said to him, I said, man, this is like the highlight of my life. And he goes, man, your life must suck. And he said it in a funny way. And it was like, so he was like, he and I are the same height, and we talked about things. And so there was a basketball player, Karl Malone was there.
Yeah. I know who Karl Malone is.
Yeah. And then I'm trying to think who else was there. There was a country music singer, but you could tell all the smart people were on the side. Hey, let's go meet Jon Stewart.
Yeah. Probably more liberal folks.
Yeah. Karl Malone. I mean, Karl Malone was like he was like a giant.
Yeah.
And of course I got to meet him, but Jon Stewart was like, wow, got to talk to this guy, got to have lunch with him.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, he's another one that shapes what we think about, because we look at through history, who was the only person that could tell the truth without dying? That was the court jester, the comedian.
Right.
And if you look, the smartest people out there are really, they tell the truth.
Yeah, science fiction and comedians, like that's writers, right? It's got to be fictionalized for us to swallow that.
Yes. So, and that goes back when we were talking about the free speech thing. Like, you can't say these things. You can't. Yeah, you really.
It's a slippery slope for sure, right? Can I ask you about the intelligence thing for a second? So,
sure, go ahead.
One of the things so how long were you at the N.S.A?
Yes, 5 years.
5 years. What is your opinion? I don't know what I can ask you. Like,
you can ask me anything. That's whether. Yeah.
So what about Snowden?
So here's the thing, he was just a contractor.
Yeah,
he was an IT guy.
Kind of a kid.
He was an IT guy in Hawaii, and I was stationed at N.S.A. in Hawaii I did 5 years in N.S.A. Hawaii, 5 years N.S.A. in Fort Meade. So his whole thing was, he thought he was he aggrandized himself to be something more than he was. But he was basically a janitor, if you want to put it in terms. And maybe he was aggrieved. Maybe he wanted to be his 15 minutes of fame. But what he uncovered was something that was not nefarious at all. The most ethical people I've ever met were I've worked with the N.S.A. I had N.S.A. lawyers that they fell under my company when I was at Fort Meade. These are guys that they are very scrupulous. They are very concerned about making sure that they follow the law. But Snowden was about himself. It was about thinking I am more than I really am.
Do you think he's convinced himself that I mean,
so here's the thing. I don't think
we can all play these games with our head.
Yeah. So
Trump does it, right? We see examples that people convince themselves that I'm doing this for the greater good. So
I don't think he didn't care about that. I think it was about what can I do to make a statement for myself.
Even at the risk of having to leave the country and risk jail time. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, but nobody cares about the guy who goes to work every day and does his job. But they notice the person that comes in and shoots all his coworkers. So that was basically what he was. And I think he got to a point where he made a decision, and then he couldn't go back on it. I think he regrets.
He had to go all in.
Yeah, he did. So in that respect, maybe I have an admiration for him. But he truly, his first instinct was to go to China and Russia, and those are countries that completely have unlicensed. They have the ability to spy on every one of their people,
right?
And they do it without regard. They don't care. They block Facebook. They block YouTube. They block everything.
Google.
Yeah. But is there a chance that he thought he was doing something good? Nah, there's a chance.
And you don't agree with the argument that he revealed that the I guess it wasn't N.S.A, but basically the intelligence state is collecting metadata on Americans and basically violating 14th Amendment privacy.
Yeah, that's slippery. That's slippery because there was nothing. The intent was to. It goes back to like contact tracing. Who talked to who? How can we know? How can we understand and prevent another, attack? Why are these people giving money to ISIS? Why is this bank account? Why are these servers in the United States? We can't look at them, but they are communicating with known terrorist organizations.
Well, their argument, I don't think, was against that. Like Glenn Greenwald and the rest of the folks kind of who are part of the Snowden narrative are arguing, look, when you're collecting metadata, the net's too big, right? And
yes.
And is it fair to say there have been some military folks say that it's not really the strategic way to actually do counterterrorism work?
No, and that was one of the things was when they put that ban on people coming to the United States. The CIA was very upset, and the FBI was upset.
Are you talking about from Muslim countries? Or
yes, yeah. When you let a guy
Trump's
in, when you let a guy in, you can track him.
Gotcha.
We wanted him in, so that was the thing that what we did. We destroyed cell towers in Afghanistan, but the SIGINTers, we didn't want you to do that because we need to hear what they're saying. If you knock out their communications, you cannot hear what they're planning. Same thing, let a guy in, then you can track him to where he's going to go, and he's going to reveal a lot more. But here's the thing about the N.S.A. collection. They don't care what you're saying. You and I are texting to each other or messaging. They don't care about that. But if it involves, they don't care if you're trying to, even the only things that the N.S.A. can actually actively collect on and record is if there is a terrorist attack happening, if there's a plane that's about to crash or it's been hijacked, or if there is a imminent threat of somebody being murdered or killed. That's the only time NSA is authorized to actually collect live information.
But how do they find out that that's going to happen without collecting live data?
Because the signals are out there. The collection apparatus is out there. So things are going to come in, and there's going to be flags. There's going to be words or codes that are flagged. Bombing, but that's why, that was
what YouTube does now.
Exactly.
And
why am I getting ads for?
Is it an algorithm?
It's off the chart. It's way off of my understanding. I mean, these are people from Stanford, MIT, Caltech. These are the people that work at NSA. NSA recruits these guys, pays them a lot, and they come to work and they recruit them, and your background has to be good to get into these programs.
This is very Goodwill Hunting right now. You know that, right?
Exactly.
Right.
But they're not looking at putting what they call warhead on the forehead. They're not looking at like, hey, how can we need information to understand, because we know someone's going to hide information from us. We have to have information. But I've never felt at any time that anything that N.S.A. did was unethical at any time. And I would have been one of the first ones to say, hey, well, this is BS. But I never felt that way when I worked there. And it could be that I was in the organization itself. But every one of my leaders, and it's the civilian leaders, like these were the most respected people, the most admired. Some of the civilians that I worked for at N.S.A., my friend's the number 3 guy at N.S.A. now. And I was like, man, he is the kindest, most compassionate person I've ever met in my entire life. And so I don't, again, I admire them. So I don't think that they would do anything, that would be contrary to what we value as Americans or as people.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I'm so far removed from that community now. I don't have a clearance. I don't have access. So I did it on purpose. Because I did.
So you didn't go kind of into the private sector, even with all this experience. Why not? Like, cause I know a lot of folks, I don't know what Blackwater is now, but
because the money's there. I didn't need the money. I didn't want to go to meetings. I didn't want to do briefings. I wanted to be just a regular guy. So I took a couple of years off. I mean, my mom, I was able to take care of her before she passed away. But I was able to spend every day for the last year with her before she died. And so that was like, I didn't want to be a part of the military industrial complex, which I do have a sort of a negative connotation with the military industrial complex.
Can you say more about that? I mean,
well, I separate it. You go back to
even Trump used that phrase recently, which I found fascinating.
Right.
And the whole notion of regime change wars and so forth, right?
It's a self-licking lollipop. So economies built, and Eisenhower, remember, he warned about that. He's like, this is in the
50s, right?
Yeah, this is bad. Early 60s goes into the Vietnam War, and I watched Ken Burns's documentary on the Vietnam War, which then you realize there's trillions of of the economy that's based upon, we need to have a strong military. And if we have a strong military, other countries have to have a strong military. And I think that's our downfall as a civilization overall, is that we invest in ways to kill each other instead of invest in ways to heal each other. What if we would have done, instead of having to deal with Hitler and World War I, what if we would have been investing in agricultural technologies and medical technologies back and then? We were able to break the sound barrier way before we were able to even cure easy diseases. Yeah. So it goes back to that. It's easier to destroy than it is to build. So
it sounds like you're still pretty optimistic about human nature, if there is such a thing.
Yeah, no. It's tough because I think the United States is not a good example, because I think 30% of us still we want to fight and kill. We want to fight the Civil War again, but it's, instead of South versus North, it's rural versus intellectual. It's rural versus urban. It's black versus white in that respect. I think Western Europe is way ahead of us. I think even Asia is a step ahead of us, but they're all this, they don't have the diversity that we have.
Yeah, certainly that.
But I still believe good. What is it? Martin Luther King's quote: "The arc of justice leans towards
the moral arc of the universe."
Yeah, it leans towards justice. Yes.
Yeah. I think it. I was talking to my anarchist friend about it. He brought that same quote up. It's fascinating. An anarchist and a lifetime Army veteran, right? Quoting the same guy. He and I agreed that it does if humans bend it.
But I think I would say the majority of the people I meet in my life, in my walks of life, are good people, regardless of where I've been.
Well, that's been my experience abroad. The vast majority of people are just like the people here, trying to live, have families, find their way, stay alive, be happy, you know. I guess and so, at some point we can kind of, I'd really like to hear your take on kind of a leftist analysis in terms of how you think it's wrong at some point. We don't have to do it now.
Right.
You know?
How what's wrong?
Well, for example, it seems to me that, and King talked about this, that militarism is so woven into our culture, you know, and in ways ideologically we're maybe not conscious
Because
of.
we drew borders, and it goes back to the formation of nations.
Yeah.
And then maybe we could go back to Ecclesiastes and say, where they had it right, nations are nothing.
Yeah.
They mean nothing. And
in
I
terms
think
of constructs and
yes,
borders, yeah.
1,000 years from now, I think we'll be a one world nation.
So
maybe more than that.
Are you saying you're a globalist?
No, I'm a complete globalist.
Steve Bannon in the back of my head. You know?
Yes, I mean, yeah. I think that's they will look upon generations from now. They'll look at, how could you guys? Why did you create borders? It's because there was a river there.
Kids, kids really it's kind of like your 8-year-old daughter going, I think it's made up.
Yeah.
We forget that it's all made up.
But go back to Valdosta. Go back to any town in Georgia. What was it divided upon? The railroad tracks. Think about it. Yeah. You were on this side of the tracks. Yeah. And the commerce was here. Yeah. The white people were here. The black people were there. Yeah. You crossed only to come to work. Yeah. And so we create these barriers, these borders. And I think 1,000 years, they're going to look like, what? Did you guys do that? What was wrong with you?
Yeah. Do you think we're an empire?
We have no expansionist motives. We don't want to expand our territory. The only territory we don't have that.
Yeah. Well, you could talk. I mean, because theorists are going to say it's really neo-colonialism, right? You have corporate.
We control other countries.
We have corporate interest abroad. We have a stake in maintaining what's happening in the Middle East in order to have fuel and oil, right?
I think under Trump, we were a laughing stock. No, I think with very few exceptions, no countries had any respect for what we would do. I think before then, I think whatever we said, Dubai would do it. Saudi Arabia might even fall in line. South Korea certainly. Japan, they would all, because they respected our leader. They would have respect for our leaders. I mean, I consider the America. Before I would have included Japan, South Korea, Saudi Arabia, even to an extent Dubai. Some of those countries will be included.
Yeah.
Because we cough and they get sick, and that's the way it works.
Do you think? Because one of the things we did in most of my classes was analyze the Department of Defense's inventory of military installations every year, which are just the ones that are acknowledged, right? They're not black ops sites or anything.
We don't have a lot. Then there's not a lot of black ops sites, but yes.
Yeah, I think it's blown out of proportion, but there are some, right?
Oh, of course they have to have them.
Right. Do you think we need, because last I saw it was around 700 of some shape or size. Oh, most of them are in Korea, Japan, and Germany.
So here's the thing about that. So in South Korea, and I'll go out and say this. So South Korea has an amazing political system. There's like 10 to 12 major political parties in South Korea,
which we could use.
Yes. The
UK is the same way, right?
Yeah, exactly. So here's another understanding is that there's a strong underground mafia in South Korea that does fund a lot of political control. And it's not, they're not going out shooting people, but they control money. They launder money. They launder money through their clubs and their casinos, and most of those are centered around U.S. military bases. And so the government looks the other way because, the money's laundered. This is money coming from GIs. This is money coming from Americans stationed over there. And so their mafia gets the pass. so they can launder their money through our military system. So South Korea has no interest in kicking us out of their country, because the mafia said they would lose billions of dollars if we left.
Well, that's been the case in Okinawa and other places, right?
Yes.
Too. I mean, the economies have kind of grown up around military and the larger ones, right? And in some ways are really dependent on it at this point.
And that's, I'm not saying that our presence in Germany keeps Russia from invading, but now our presence in Poland is even stronger. Does it keep Russia from? Yeah, it does, because an overt attack would trigger a world war.
Do you think Russia has expansionists besides the Ukraine?
Oh no, no.
I guess that's the notion of a kind of traditional empire is probably done, right?
Yeah, even China doesn't have expansion. They're going to build islands and keep them. But Russia took Crimea. We let them. But Crimea was historically Russian. It was only geographically Ukrainian. Everyone there speaks Russian. They don't speak Ukrainian. Same with Eastern Ukraine. They speak Russian. They're ethnically Russian. So the Ukrainians, they don't like, if you go to Kiev and you speak Russian, ooh, that's not good. Lvov, you speak Russian, they're probably going to beat you up in the alley. But the rest of it, so Russia does not want to expand, but it doesn't want to lose anything either. There's a about that. But yeah, we sort of let Crimea go because it was all ethnically Russian. There was no tie to the Ukrainian heritage. So Russia does not want anything but to stay itself, keep its dignity in the world.
So what's going on now, that, not to change gears too much, but so you did go to the private sector. What are you doing, and what did you take away from all that? Because it sounds like you sound like the same guy I knew.
Yeah. Somebody said that to me the other day. They could see physically I've aged.
Oh, me too.
But when they talk to me, they're like, "You sound like you're a guy in your 20s, optimistic, idealistic." I've always been an idealistic optimist. How did that happen? And
well, especially after 30 almost years in the military, traveling.
I was never a cynic. I looked at the world as tomorrow is better than yesterday. And I still, even this last 4 years, I still believe tomorrow is better than yesterday. We had a little setback. Sometimes you fall down the stairs with your hand in your pocket. Sometimes it happens, Sometimes you forget to shave your shoulders. I don't know, but it's you do have setbacks, but I think overall we progress.
So what are the electoral college?
What do I want to do in the future?
Well, that, and I guess since you brought it up, like in terms of the future of the U.S., so it seems to me some pretty serious damage has been done about institutional faith.
Horrible. It's going to take decades to undo it.
The cultural divide's pretty serious. So are you optimistic about that?
I haven't seen violence yet. We haven't seen street
skirmishes,
but we haven't seen Trump supporters killing Biden supporters, or when I look at, so I would tell you the person that I most admire in politics is AOC. That's the person, and Andrew Yang. I think these are people who are
the next generation.
This is where we need to go. And I think then I look at people who demonize them and I say, "Ooh, I'm not going to be on this side. I want to be." I see it resonates with me, even as a 54-year-old white male in Trump country. What AOC resonates with me. What Bernie Sanders, unfortunately, I wish he was 30 years younger. What he says, it makes sense for me.
Yeah. Will the machine allow them to do what needs to be done?
Not yet. We're slow. And that's maybe why we've existed for so long, is because change is slow. We've rarely gone back. We've rarely regressed. This is the last 4 years was the only time we've really regressed. But we fought the regression. And I think that it's going to take time. It was a setback. But I think maybe you and I won't see it, but I think, future generations will see us overcome this well, what I want to say is this regression in our society.
Why?
But it does, the disproportionate, the wealth gap is a significant issue though.
Yeah.
And that affects people.
Gotcha. Is there anything you want to talk about?
No, not really.
That we haven't talked about.
You still riding bikes?
We were ahead of the curve on the mountain bike thing, weren't we? We
were way ahead. Yeah.
We were really
I actually still had that bike up until a year ago.
Wow.
Yeah. And it finally just collapsed, but yeah,
wow.
I remember you were riding in some races and you had a shirt, and on the back of the shirt, didn't you say you had the word fatigue on it? Or somebody had that shirt on that somebody.
Oh yeah. So the people,
if you were behind them, you were thinking that fatigue. So yeah, I remember you were like hardcore into biking.
Yeah.
No, what we need to talk about is we cannot go this far in time without talking to each other. So
yeah.
that has to be a basic.
Well, now, especially with the technology and all of that.
Yeah. I wish I wouldn't have shaved. If I would have known you were going to contact me, I wouldn't have shaved my beard off, because it was like 8 different colors, so it would have been the same as yours. So we may have looked like brothers. I'll see what I can do.